My name is Ted Hadjiantich. I'm the founder of Great Questions at ACC. I teach in the government department and as well as in the humanities department, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about Great Questions before introducing you to panelists who who've completed Great Questions in the past or who are currently enrolled in Great Questions today, who are going to share some of their Great Questions experiences with you. And I will be saying Great Questions a lot. So Great Questions is a way of meeting the student success course requirement at ACC. And it does this in a unique way. You know, college is about gaining new skills and preparing for a career. And that's an important part of the mission of a college. But it's also about an opportunity to think about things more deeply together that are important to all of us because we're human beings. And Great Questions tries to really center that experience in higher education. An opportunity to talk with people that don't think like you about things that are all important to us collectively, like what does it mean to be a good person? What's the best form of government? How should people live together? What is love? What is beauty? Like, what are all these important things that we all want to be connected with more deeply? How do we have an academic experience that does justice to our humanity and is not just the box that we need to check on the way to getting a degree? Great Questions is about providing that opportunity. It's very unique because it was led and founded by faculty. This wasn't something that was created sort of through an administrative hierarchy. It was created by ACC faculty that thought that this would be an important experience for students to have. Here are some of the texts that we read in Great Questions. It's a discussion-based class, which means that there's no lecture. No professor stands in front of the class and tells people what to think. We read from Homer and Plato and Euclid and religious texts and Chinese poetry and Bhakti poets from India. Students do Euclidean demonstrations at the board over here. You'll see two people working through Proposition 47. I hope we get to hear a little bit about your experiences with Euclid in the panel. It's an engaging class. You're about to hear a little bit more about that. As a first-year success class, it has excellent impact on students' persistence and transfer rates to other universities. First-time in college students that successfully complete the Great Questions seminar will move from the fall to the spring at a rate of 98%, and the fall to fall persistence is 85%. So we see that as a first-year seminar, we actually have quite a good impact on helping students move through their academic programs. And I think in part because it helps students see the meaning in doing that, beyond just checking the box to get to somewhere else. That we have this marvelous opportunity to be together in a classroom with diverse groups of students talking about persistent human questions, and that we shouldn't take that for granted. We should do as much as we can to maximize the available opportunities for that. We've got the Great Questions journey through the core curriculum, which are classes that meet general education course requirements at Austin Community College that also focus on discussion-based study of transformative texts. These are some of the elements of that. Great Questions at ACC is inspiring community colleges from all over the nation to do similar things with general education courses, to center discussion-based study of transformative texts. So far, 27 other community colleges have started to work in their core curriculum, faculty-driven, of course, with focusing on discussion-based study of transformative texts. And people are taking notice. We've a most recent article in the New York Times featured Great Questions as an example of where meaningful higher education is happening in undergraduate courses. And that was particularly exciting because we were the only college that was featured in that article and doing like the liberal arts really, really well. And I think that's really special as a community college to have that featured in the Times. Okay, so I'd like to, thank you. I'd like to now have our panelists introduce themselves, and I've got a number of questions for y'all, and I'm really looking forward to hearing about your experience in Great Questions. So we'll start with Julia and go around this way, and please turn your mics on. And just let us know your name, if you're in Great Questions currently, and if not, when did you complete Great Questions, and your major as well. Thank you.
I'm Julia, and I'm a government major, and I'm currently enrolled in Great Questions.
Hi, I am Sam Henderson. I'm also currently enrolled in Great Questions, and I'm going into paleontology.
I'm Lily, and my major is Korean, and I completed Great Questions in 2022.
Hi, my name is Taryn Blackman. I'm studying studio art, and I previously finished the Great Questions seminar last semester.
It's Anthony Hampton, degree is Peace and Conflict Studies, and I completed Great Questions back in 2021.
My name is Ragad Abu Jabal. People call me Ragad. I am a computer science major, and I'm currently enrolled in the Great Questions class.
Hi, my name's Ray, and I took the Great Questions class in the 5-week course. Pardon me, I'm not used to talking into a microphone. Last summer. So, thank you.
Hi, I'm Marie, and I am majoring for government/pre-law, and I complete my Great Question in the spring of 2023.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate you all coming out to share your experience with our group and the folks online. Okay, so my first question is about how a Great Questions course differs from other courses you've taken at ACC. And I'd like to hear from students that are currently enrolled in the class. Maybe you can just kind of set the vibe for us about what does the classroom even feel like? Like, how does that class feel different even from day one? And I'd like to invite Regard and Sam to start us off with this first one.
Okay, I guess I can start. So immediately when you get into a Great Questions classroom, it's more, instead of lecture-based, it's discussion-based, obviously. So we got in there after reading a couple chapters of the Odyssey, and we took all of the chairs and tables and put them in a giant circle so we could have a giant discussion about just the Odyssey in general and questions that we had or that kind of stuff.
Going back to the point that Sam was talking about, it's a more discussion-based class, and you get into discussions with different people every time, which are all in your class. So you get to know them on a more deeper level, and you get to see other people's perspectives. Like, we're all reading the same text, but everyone has a different idea and a different version of what they read, and I think that's really interesting, and you will never get to experience this in other classes.
Thank you. Anyone else want to chime in on that question before I move to the next one? Taryn? Yeah.
Awesome. So just building on those points, I think it's important to recognize it's a curriculum that allows you to recognize there's no right answer or no right perspective. It's a way for you to engage with your peers and understand where they're coming from, and perhaps even change your point of view when it comes to what you're discussing.
Thanks for that. Okay, my next question. Great Questions fulfills the Student Success course mandate. And one of our explicit goals is to help students navigate their first semester at Austin Community College. And so my question for Lily and Ray, who both took Great Questions in their first semester, is how did Great Questions help you navigate your first semester at ACC and help you feel like you belong in college?
Great Questions was really important because it taught me to think differently and not think in black and white, because there's so much gray area in Great Questions. So that just helped me further understand material that I read in future courses.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of practical application. We did learn how to create presentations and everything like that, but in taking a 5-week course, and I took a full course load, I had no idea what I was doing. And having that class first thing in the morning where we all got to sit around and talk about life, and reality and what we're all experiencing, the fact that we all have totally different perspectives on things, where everybody's sat in that live sketching class and looking at the same statue from different angles. There is no right answer. And the material itself is mind-bending. But because you have those discussions with your classmates, you get to hear all the different answers and have a greater, clearer picture of the concept as a whole. And no, great questions kept me going because I needed that.
Cool. Thanks, Ray. Thanks, Lily. How many of you developed friendships in your Great Questions class? By a show of hands. Did you make friends in your class? Yeah, some. Okay. Yeah, I think that one of the things that I've noticed in my Great Questions classes is that students get to know each other better in that class than they do in other classes, and that is very supportive in a student's first year journey at ACC. Okay, I've got another question for y'all. So this is for students who completed Great Questions in the past. What is something meaningful that you remember from your course, either a discussion you remember having or a text that you found particularly meaningful? So I'd like to invite Maria and Taryn to respond to this. And I'm sure you all have things you want to jump in on here well. So what's an experience that you remember from Great Questions that sort of sticks with you today?
Sure. So just to begin, we discussed geometry with Euclid's. So one of the texts that we had for an introduction was talking about how math is instructed and comparing that to other disciplines. So one of the unique things is it took the idea of what if we taught music differently? What if instead of learning an instrument, instead you learned what are these notes, how do you recognize these, and you begin there, and then eventually you'll get to actually creating music. So it's kind of a unique perspective, because if you turn that around and think about how do you learn math, it's very rote memorization, rote creation of your problems and answering the questions, but it doesn't get into did you learn or did you take anything away from that. And when you approach this with Euclid's, you actually have to start off with your propositions and your definitions and going in depth into not only are those things true, but can you test that? Can you practice that? And I think it creates a different understanding of math and recognizing it's not just a discipline that exists on its own. It's something that would have been influenced by other contemporary philosophers or other individuals at the time.
So just like she said, it was also the same season we did started the geometry of Euclid book, and for me it was kind of like, I don't know if it was planning like that, and we did start the Euclid book, and in my math class we also were doing some starting to learn more about Euclid also. That was kind of like a big confusion for me. I was kind of surprised, and as a curious person, I decided to do the research of Euclid book and keep it as an audio version now. And it was something that stuck in my brain. And since my Great Question professor was separating all of us as a group team to work on the Euclid chapters, and it was something we were working on and describing each group in front of the class, and it was every time we were doing the description, we were going step by step, and I was trying to describe with my group like the way I can visualize it and make sure that everybody in my group and we can understand, and everybody in the class also can make sure we are all on the same page. So it was kind of something interesting for me.
Thanks. So they're both talking about Euclid, and you might not know what Euclid is, and so I want to just kind of give you just a little bit. So Euclid is an ancient geometer. So he wrote propositions dealing with like the relationship of figures in space, and this is the first textbook ever written first mathematics textbook. And so these two students just said their favorite thing this might come as you as sort of surprising, well, their favorite thing in the class was this math book that we talked about in a humanities class. And it's a very unique way of approaching mathematics, because as Taryn and as Maria said, it's something which gets you to realize the deeply creative nature of mathematics. It's not about plugging numbers into an equation. It's not not about like memorize this thing and apply it to a word problem. It's how does my mind work? It's like you learn about your thinking through studying Euclid, and it's a really powerful experience. Anybody else want to chime in on sort of memorable experiences or texts that you've had in Great Questions? Yeah.
So not so much a specific text per se. I had the Great Questions for state and local government as well as general government. But for me, the most memorable experience was just the openness of the class and sort of the open invitation for people to not just be a student, but a human being who is here to learn and to contribute and to engage. And you're given inherently in these kind of classes, you're given value, where you become more than a statistical number for the college. You become a human being who is being asked, what do you want to contribute? What do you think? And truthfully, I wonder if half the students that are asked that question have ever been asked that question in a meaningful way. So to me, that is the most beautiful part of these kind of classes, is that you're more than a student. You're a human being that's being asked to please contribute, because your voice, your opinions, your experiences matter. So to me, that was the best part.
Thank you. That was lovely. Anybody else on this? Yeah, Ray.
Piggybacking like directly off of that, this was the first kind of experience of its kind that I ever had in my life. I used to be so shy. Like, I would have other people buy things from clerks at stores for me because I couldn't have that interaction with them. Something in my brain said, this is an emergency, panic. And to sit down with a group of people and exactly like be asked my opinion and be forced to share that with other people and like ride out the anxiety of being known, being seen, and what's really in here, because you can't fake your way through that class. You can't be like, this is the right answer. There's no right answer. So every answer in a way is right if you can all sit together, like with Miss Marie and her class, and like make sure you understand the material all in a way where you can all meet in the middle. But because you're all able to like make all those connections now, pardon me, you have a greater piece of the puzzle, so to speak. And that's invaluable. That changes you as a person.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's wonderful. I mean, many students genuinely have transformative experiences in the class where they sort of get to work out talking to people in real life, and that's something that we don't do a lot of, and especially after the pandemic, a class like this, which is discussion-based, which centers conversation, I think is really helpful in getting us to engage with other human beings, and especially other human beings that aren't like we're not on the same page with about important things. I think it helps us clarify our own understanding better. Okay, now one of the things I noticed about this group is that none of you are philosophy majors or humanities majors. This is a humanities class that's very much steeped in philosophy, but we've got majors from computer science, government, paleontology, studio art, Japanese, pre-law, foreign languages. So my question is, what benefits should students expect to gain from their participation in a Great Questions course, regardless of their major or career? Why is something like this important for students that are in a variety of different disciplines that aren't necessarily philosophical, like completely intelligibly philosophically oriented? And perhaps we could start with Julia.
I think there's a lot to gain from a discussion-based class like this because we're asked a lot of great questions about life, and a lot of people bring to the table a lot of different perspectives. And I think there's something to gain from like being introduced to people that maybe don't think the same way as you, because it kind of teaches you how to interact with someone respectfully in like a professional setting, an academic setting, social setting. And yeah, I think a lot of the time, like, we kind of are surrounded by people with similar perspectives, and in this class, we're kind of forced to interact with people that maybe think differently, and the goal of the class isn't to get people to agree with your opinion, it's to kind of understand each other, and I think that can be really useful when you're dealing with people in a setting that think differently. So,
Thanks. Anybody else on this? Yeah, Taryn.
So one of the things about my experience that was a little bit different from all of the others here is that mine was virtual as opposed to in person. So awesome. That's perfect. So one of the things that I think is unique about that is that in our lives and like social media or other venues, like you do interact online with other people, but how often do you think about those individuals as other people on the other side of the screen? So one of the things that was really cool about this is it's a lot of discussion based, it's a lot of back and forth through these modules, but you do really get a perspective on someone else's opinion through a written format, and it's asynchronous, so you're not always on the same time or the same space, but you still really get to interact and have that knowledge and understanding of people just through a different lens without having to be necessarily in person.
I think another really positive aspect is that this class forces you to articulate your view, because we live in a time, obviously, where opinions are thrown out, but there's not a lot of articulation behind that opinion, whatever side someone is on. But this class creates a space that is respectful and neutral and just encourages you and invites you to, okay, your opinion is your opinion, but let's dig into it. Why? Let's go deeper. And you have to articulate, and it forces you to think, why is this my opinion? Does this person possibly have a different take that maybe I want to take in? It creates an environment that is rich for being an open-minded, thinking, critical thinking individual, which is great and necessary in our times, I feel.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. All right. Anyone else want to speak on this last one before Maria? Yeah.
Okay, for my experience with the Great Question Seminar, I'll say the first day of the class, the first thing the professor told us was everybody have to speak. That first was kind of like a rule, but also was kind of scary for all of us. But we thought it was kind of like, is that a class or what? But it was some way to learn about each other's, handle, listen, and also know how to communicate with each others. But it's some way to understand others, to be open and also give feedback, but beside that, to not be judgmental with others, to listen to others, also participate toward each others. So it's a class where we are open toward each other to listen and to also participate.
I love that. This is a great note to open it up to some of your questions here, if you have them for our panel. I mean, this is exactly what we need in the country, right? Being able to listen to each other, and be able to talk to each other across differences. And in Great Questions, we get to practice doing that. And I think it makes us, I think the more that we do this sort of thing in higher ed, the better we'll be as a nation, because we can actually start to listen to each other and talk to each other. Thank you very much for being here, panel. I really appreciate you taking Saturday morning to come out and spend some time with us. So let's give our panel a big round of applause, please.